Hello, I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. From genius to BS. Donald Trump once praised Vladimir Putin as a strategic mastermind, but now, with Ukraine still burning and peace nowhere in sight, America's president sounds frustrated, even betrayed. So, what changed? A messy war, an uncooperative Russian leader, and the slow collapse of Trump's most audacious foreign policy promise. On this episode, we examine something that once seemed impossible. Donald Trump is no longer praising Vladimir Putin. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
It seems U.S. President Donald Trump has had enough of Vladimir Putin and his unwillingness to come to the negotiating table. He wants to hit Russia where it hurts if it continues not to comply with pressure to reach a peace deal. Trump put down a concrete deadline for Russia to come around to a peace deal during his meeting with the NATO Secretary General.
We're very, very unhappy with him, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs.
For now, at least, this shift in approach from the White House can be seen as a reason for optimism among Kiev's leaders, especially since this declaration from Trump also comes with a pledge to send new arms to Ukraine to bolster its defenses, something that the US president wasn't very keen on doing ever since he took office. But while much of this has been welcomed by European and Ukrainian authorities, there is a blemish on this otherwise pristine silver platter.
It is very positive that President Trump is taking a strong stance on Russia. On the other hand, 50 days is a very long time if we see that they are killing innocent civilians also every day.
Over the last couple of months, Russia has intensified its attacks against Ukraine. Moscow's forces have been relentless in their targeting of not only military positions, but also in their strikes against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. The exact amount of weapons and their kind that Trump does end up sending to Ukraine will matter, because that will very likely decide whether Ukraine's defenders will be able to withstand this renewed Russian onslaught.
And now we're zoning in on the East-splaining portion of our show. Western military aid has been one of the main pillars of Ukraine's defense efforts against Russia since the beginning of the war. 2025, however, has not delivered in that regard, as the United States wasn't too keen on passing new military aid until now.
Ukraine needs different kinds of weapons to continue to successfully oppose both Russian attempts to break through the front of targets across the country. What's more, Kiev is also keen on hitting the Russians where it hurts, so the military bases deep within Russian territory. These are from where Russia carries out many of its airstrikes against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. In essence, Ukraine needs a mix of both offensive and defensive arms from its Western partners. An example of defensive weapons that it has received are the Patriot missile systems, which help safeguard Ukrainian skies against Russian missiles and drone strikes. An example of offensive arms that have been supplied to Ukraine are the HIMARS. These are used to disrupt supply chains and eliminate high-value targets. They are particularly effective against high concentrations of enemy troops. But these are only a small fraction of what Ukraine needs. Kiev is also in dire need of ammunition to fuel its guns and tanks and artillery. Modern heavy equipment like the Abrams tanks and top-end fighter jets like the F-16s are also something that Ukraine needs more of.
And now, as always, it's time to explore the issue in greater detail, so let's begin. For years, Trump treated Putin like the world's shrewdest strongman. In 2016, he called him a great leader. In 2022, he labeled Russia's invasion of Ukraine genius. And even during his second presidential campaign in 2024, Trump claimed he could end the war in 24 hours. Just one conversation with Vlad, and the largest European war since 1945 would simply vanish. I know, we're all tired of that unfulfilled claim, aren't we? Fast forward to mid-2025, and the story has changed. Trump now admits the war is more difficult than people would have any idea. He says Putin has been also more difficult. And last week, in a rare moment of frustration, Trump dropped the mask. We get a lot of BS thrown at us by Putin. That's what he said. Let's be clear, Trump never abandoned his admiration for Putin lightly. So what we're seeing now is especially important. Now, before this happened, he spent years defending him, even after the Russian military slaughtered civilians in Bucha, abducted children, and bombed maternity hospitals. Even after US intelligence confirmed that Putin interfered in Trump's own 2016 election. Why? Because praising Putin wasn't about foreign policy, it was about self-validation. Trump saw Putin not as a threat, but as a mirror, a fellow strongman, unbound by norms, able to dominate and be feared. That illusion cracked after Trump returned to the White House in 2025. He resumed military aid to Ukraine, albeit reluctantly, and soon discovered what previous presidents already knew. Putin doesn't deal in good faith. His phone call on the 3rd of July with Vladimir Putin expected to yield progress, but yielded only frustration. The next day, Russia launched its largest military strike on Ukraine in over a year. Drones, missiles, you name it. And then came the soundbite. I'm not happy with President Putin at all. Well, that's new. Some will say this is just Trump being Trump, changing tone to fit the headlines, not the policy. That could be partly true. After all, the arms are still flowing, and Trump's team insists he's just realigning foreign aid with American interests. And the Kremlin knows it too. Putin, according to insiders, believes he can still outlast Ukraine and outmaneuver Trump. If the Russian army wins in the east, he will claim it proves Trump's weapons shipments were too late. If Ukraine holds the line, he will blame Trump for escalating the war. Either way, Trump's credibility is the collateral damage. In the end, this isn't just about two presidents and a broken bromance. It's about a dangerous assumption at the heart of Trump's worldview, that you can flatter autocrats into behaving better, that you can handshake your way out of genocide, that diplomacy is just business and peace is just persuasion. Ukraine knows better, and now even Trump might be starting to learn. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Wojciech Lorenz, Coordinator for International Security at the Polish Institute for International Affairs. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello.
So we started this program with an intro containing lots of Trump skepticism, but would you say that Trump's worldview might actually be shifting when it comes to Vladimir Putin, compared to what he used to say about him earlier on and what he says right now?
Yes, it's definitely we have seen in recent days and weeks a slight change. It's difficult to say how significant this change is, but when you look at the pattern, definitely there is a change of tone, the change of narrative. The major issue is that we still don't know whether this administration and this president wanted to get U.S. out of Ukraine and Europe almost at all cost, irrespective of what consequences it would have for general European security, or whether there is some negotiating tactics, and the administration wanted to exploit all diplomatic pathways before it started to apply pressure on Russia. So with this change of narrative, the change of tone, irrespective of whether it is under the pressure of internal politics, the realities associated to relatively high support for Ukraine in the US and in Congress, that Trump had to change the narrative, or this is a part of this strategy that after exploitation of political diplomatic pathways, administration will start to apply some pressure on Russia. The fact is that we can see this change of tone, and this is a good thing.
So now we have 50 days until the sanctions start to bite. Some people say it's too much. Some people say, look, if Trump understands that Putin isn't really treating him seriously, not even respecting him, then 50 more days will not change much. Do you think that perhaps there should be additional requirements, like getting to a ceasefire quicker than that, or otherwise some of the sanctions will be introduced earlier?
Yes, obviously there is the different interests and different perceptions, and a lot of analysts would say that it's futile to negotiate with Russia, and you should apply all possible pressure from the day one. But this is not how politics and diplomacy works. And then we have to understand that we still have a relatively new U.S. administration with a new mandate, and it's a commendable, positive thing that they tried the pathway of diplomacy, even if only to convince the people who would say that we are not doing enough. We are not exploiting diplomatic pathways, and they resist support for Ukraine because of that. So you can demonstrate clearly that we tried all possible ways to find a negotiated solution to the conflict before we again started to apply pressure, or even bigger pressure through substantially more biting sanctions. So if it is a pathway, if it is a diplomatic road to bigger support for Ukraine, again, coordinated policy between United States and Europe, if it is a road to some strategy towards Russia that we do not have, neither in NATO or generally in the West, there is no strategy, neither in the United States or in Europe. There is only this approach that we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes, which is not a strategy, because we can see that as long as it takes can be only to the next elections. So I wouldn't be in this camp that we should unleash everything that we have or United States has in its disposal, because this is unrealistic. But if it goes in the right direction, if it even if it offers some ground for criticism that it is too little, too late, it's better to go into this right direction instead of having a black case scenario that the new administration says that, okay, we have nothing to do with this war, it is not our war, we are not going to support Ukraine, and the Europeans should take care of all this mess. So yes, it could be faster, it could be more biting, but let's focus on this positive thing that there is a change in narrative and possibly a change of policy that I would like to see in the coming weeks and months.
So now we're also sharing responsibility between the US and Europe. Europe is going to foot the bill. America will deliver the weapons. Obviously, from Trump's standpoint, this is a win because he's got a new deal for his military-industrial complex while not using the money of American taxpayers for it, which is something that he promised he would actually reduce. But do you think it's going to be effective? And also another question, how far will the US be prepared to go when it comes to the types of weapons to be delivered? I'm asking this because we had this rather frustrating logic of avoiding escalation under the previous administration, under Joe Biden. We had Jake Sullivan always saying, oh, we cannot send this type of weapon because it could actually be escalatory towards Moscow. If this is going to be more of a business type of arrangement, do you think some of these restrictions might actually no longer apply?
Well, generally we are at the very beginning of this process that can still unfold, develop with this change of policy, and these are only the first signs. So it's difficult to say how it will translate into those bigger issues, to the approach with escalation. I'm afraid that both previous administration, Biden's administration, but also this administration are very much risk averse, and they want to avoid the escalation. And
do you think it only applies to Russia, if I may? Because when you look at Iran, well, that was a major change. We haven't seen it under Biden. Do you think that with respect to Russia, this aversion to risk will continue to be a problem, though?
Absolutely. There is a huge difference between Iran, that does not still possess nuclear weapons, and Russia, that has the biggest nuclear arsenal. And you can sense it from Trump's different statements that he is very much afraid of nuclear escalation, and this is very often, I think, underestimated how deep this concern of nuclear escalation is in his mind. And very often, I don't want to make this historical references because it will take too long, but we very often also mistakenly ascribe to President Reagan, this policy of toughness. He was also very much afraid of nuclear escalation and was against nuclear weapons, and this was the basis of his strategic arms initiative, of the policy of getting rid of nuclear weapons, which actually was unrealistic, but also was turned into some positive U.S. policies. But I think that Trump is afraid of escalation. He would like to keep United States away from Ukraine, and this is what he's doing. But if Europeans are able to assure that United States will deliver weapons, even if Europeans will foot the bill, this is going to be a good thing. There is awareness among Europeans, European decision makers in different capitals that if Russia is going to win this war, it will have a disastrous consequences for European security, not only for Ukraine, but also for the status of Central and Eastern Europe and security of the whole NATO and the future of EU. So there is this determination. The money is coming. The industrial capacity is being increased. It should be done much earlier, and obviously there are serious limitations. But at least if we are going to secure and rely on U.S. deliveries of weapons and still U.S. military presence in Europe and support for NATO, we should be on the safe side, and we should be able to secure the foundations of European security architecture.
So one quick question. You said we don't have a strategy towards Russia. What should that strategy be? Should we be afraid, for example, that Russian economy will begin to collapse?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Of course, this fear of the collapse of Russian economy and collapse of Russia and having nuclear weapons on the loose is one of the major arguments used in the West against exerting a substantial pressure on Russia, which is one of the major weaknesses in our approach. And a full-fledged strategy towards Russia should include exactly this, the assessment of what we would like to achieve with sanctions, whether there is a real risk and threat of Russia collapsing and disintegrating again. I think that this is a completely unfounded fear. This is a completely different reality that the world faced at the end of the 80s. Russia is completely different. The regime has different tools to keep the country going, redistribute the money. So the full-fledged Russia strategy would include this element, but first and foremost would combine different elements of Western power: military, defense and deterrence, support for Ukraine, influencing Russia's threat perception and influencing Russia's well-being and financial and economic stability through sanctions. This is the strategy that we should have, but we do not have. And to some extent, unfortunately, because of the new administration, because there were hopes that we will prepare a framework for the Russian strategy in NATO. There was a tasking in the previous NATO summit in Washington, but once the new administration took over in the US, the works on the strategy were withheld and they did not progress.
Wojciech Lorenz was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And now we move on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. Trade between Russia and China declined by just over 9% year-on-year in the first half of 2025. Despite this drop, the two countries continue to present themselves as inseparable allies.
Since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it can be said that China has become Russia's most important partner. Trade between the two surged in the following years, and despite its recent drop, it still amounted to more than $100 billion in the first half of this year. This decrease, however, is in line with a trend that has been observed since 2024. While commerce between the two allies surged dramatically by 26% in 2023, it grew by only 1.9% in 2024. This information came to light around the same time as the Russian foreign minister met with his Chinese counterpart following a trip to North Korea. The Chinese top diplomat was to have called Sino-Russian relations, quote, the most stable and strategically valuable among major powers in the world.
Russia seems eager to show that it means business when it comes to developing artificial intelligence systems. Major Russian airports are now reportedly preparing to add AI to their security systems.
The new AI systems being introduced to airports include real-time analysis of surveillance footage. This is meant to help detect potential security threats. For example, the system should be able to identify when a passenger mistakenly shows up on the airport tarmac outside of designated areas. The new system is also meant to use neural networks to detect passengers trying to bypass security checkpoints, as well as monitor incorrectly parked vehicles. The technology behind the AI systems is being developed by Russian facial recognition company Entech Lab, which is currently under Western sanctions. The company itself claims that the AI system has already been successfully tested at one of Moscow's main airports, but it has not specified at which one.
EU foreign ministers are to sanction individuals and entities that the bloc believes have been destabilizing Moldova. This comes amid reports of renewed Russian efforts to carry out heavy disinformation campaigns across the country.
A sanctions regime against such entities was already adopted in 2023 in an effort to defend Moldova from Russian attempts to regain political control over the country. Hitherto, 16 people and 2 organizations have been blacklisted, including a couple of oligarchs who fled the country. One of these is Ilhan Shaw, whom Moldovan police believe was responsible for the vote-buying scheme from last year that nearly swung a key referendum on future EU membership. The new set of entries into the sanctions list includes 7 individuals and 3 other entities who are said to be linked to Shaw in some shape or form. These stronger efforts by the European Union come as Moldova is preparing itself for September's parliamentary elections, which are widely seen as pivotal to the country's future.
Results for the people.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Bye for now.